Vice Chair Critchley, the meeting is now live.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll call the meeting to order. It's 4:05 p.m. We have quorum with 5 commissioners present. I understand our fearless leader, Chair Kent, is having some technical difficulties, but hopefully will be joining us. Do we have regrets from Commissioner Thomas? Is that right?
I have not received regrets from him personally, but perhaps he has sent them on to the chair.
Okay. So I'll start with the land acknowledgement. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kmaq, being ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaty signed in this territory and recognizes that we're all treaty people. Moving right on to community announcements. Are there any community announcements? Okay, seeing none, I'll move to, there's no approval of the minutes for this agenda, I understand. That's correct?
That is correct, Vice Chair.
Okay, excellent. So moving on to approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Are there any additions and deletions?
Vice Chair Critchley, there are no additions or deletions to this agenda.
Okay, excellent. So I'd ask for a mover and seconder for the agenda circulated.
Moved.
Okay, Commissioner Giles.
Second.
Commissioner Blackburn, I think. Excellent. Call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have an agenda. Business arising out of the minutes. Seeing none. I'd call for a declaration of conflict of interest from commissioners. Okay, seeing none. Consideration of deferred business. I understand there is none.
That is correct.
Okay, correspondence, petitions, and delegations. So first, correspondence. I understand some correspondence was circulated.
Yes, Vice Chair. Correspondence was received and circulated for item 10.1.1.
Excellent, thank you. And no petitions and presentations?
There was no presentations received from the clerk's office, and there's no presentation scheduled.
Excellent, thank you. Item 9, information items brought forward. I understand there are none. And moving on to 10.1.1, Halifax Regional Police 24-25 Operating Budget Framework. I understand Acting Chief McLean has a presentation.
That is correct. And I'm just going to start sharing the screen if that's all right with you, Acting Chief.
Yeah, it's good. Good, good evening, folks. Go ahead, Andrew.
I'm just confirming, is the screen being shared?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
And will you be advancing the slides?
Yes, Acting Chief, just say next slide when you wish me to proceed.
Perfect. Are we good to go, Vice Chair?
Good to go, Chief.
Okay, thank you. I was going to say good morning, folks. It seems like that. Good evening, folks. Good afternoon. Welcome to the board and to the people that are watching online. Tonight's discussion is very similar to the discussion I had last week that was presented to the board with the probably a slightly quicker iteration that speaks to some of the budgetary asks and is designed to speak to the public consultative part. Next slide. So this speaks to the current budget situation for Halifax Regional Police for 23-24. $94,622,400 broken down in relation to revenue and recoveries, either 13 million plus, compensation and benefits at 1.1 million, and non-compensation operating expenses at 6 million. The piece to this is that roughly 95 to 94% of our budget is in fact tied up with personnel and salaried members. Next slide. The introductory statement in relation to the preparation framework. So we've been working closely with HRM finance staff in relation to developing the 24-25 budget. Again, this is a framework that speaks to that. Takes into consideration the following fiscal requirements and trends, inflationary issues related to rising costs over the past 5 years for existing goods and services, uniform supplies, software renewals, maintenance, training. So all of those things, like I said at the budget meeting, what $100,000 would have got us in ammunition a few years ago does not get us that today. So that's just the reality. We also have contractual related pressures in areas of compensation that are related to collective agreements, external service providers, leases, that sort of thing. And then lastly, adjustments to revenue opportunities and cost recoveries resulting from previous year experience and future expectations. Next slide. So in preparation of this framework presentation, there were certain things that were taken into consideration. One was looking at prior BOPC requests that were either unfulfilled or not put forward. And obviously, because I think that's an important piece of the conversation in terms of which was important a few years ago. We still have to consider it. Have priorities changed, or have we mitigated against some certain issues, which has taken place in both cases. Also, the alignment of our strategic plan themes, which I presented at the board, probably, well, I think it was 2 days into the job. And then obviously priorities from the organization and overall looking at basically an environmental scan of what's going on. And I put in bold their support needed for the frontline response, because I can tell you that is something that's extremely important to this organization. I think all of this discussion has to be taken under the reality of a very quickly increasing population within HRM. Depending on where you look, either the fastest or second fastest growing municipality in Canada. The recent article in the Financial Post from the information from the Greater Halifax Partnership has 50,000 people coming to Halifax within the last 2 years. To put in context, that's 2.5 Toros that have joined Halifax in the last 2 years. Next slide. The alignment themes that I had presented previously are community safety, addressing recruitment and retention challenges, workplace engagement, member wellness, relationship with the public, our response, proactive policing, operational readiness, mental health response, and issues related to the policing transformation study with the RCMP. Next slide. So our focus today is to highlight those new initiatives and recommended resources in relation to the public consultation process, which we will have tonight, and another one later on in the next month. Next slide, please. So the first thing let's go back one. Thank you. As I spoke, issues around frontline response, which are very important to me, and I think to the organization, I think to the community in general. It speaks to issues of community safety, relationship with the public, operational readiness, and as well as mental health response. Proposed 12 constables spread across the watches, which is 3 for each, that speaks to mental health calls, but specifically more along the lines of hospital wait times. As has been presented at previous board meetings, we spend approximately anywhere between 3,500 and 4,500 hours of patrol hours in the hospital with those people that we've taken under the Involuntary Psychiatric Treatment Act, as is required by statute. As was stated previously, there are only 8,760 hours in a year. So that's a significant amount of time that we spend in the hospital. We want to use these constables twofold. One is to help mitigate against the time spent in the hospital by having, through a pilot project, by having less than one officer being able to guard, for lack of a better word, as the IPTA mandates, those that we take to the hospital for periods of time, and that's based on a structural arrangement with the hospital as well. Of the 4,200 EDP, emotionally disturbed persons, forms that we put in, 650 of those in 2022 were related to people that we actually took to the hospital. So these are people that at some point an officer has come in contact with and has felt it necessary to take them, put them under arrest according to the act, as the act allows, involuntarily, and take them to the hospital because they are a danger to themselves or someone else. At the same time, it also provides much needed support for the patrol division in terms of bolstering the numbers on the street, because we have spent a considerable amount of overtime over this last year in getting in sufficient numbers in the patrol division on a daily basis. The other part of that speaks to the community response officer. I'm biased, I guess, to a degree as a former divisional commander, the great work that the community response officers do on a daily basis. They deal with community-based issues, establish relationships are in the community. My proposal would allow an extended community response officer reach, both in terms of area and actually in terms of hours of work, and at the same time have some direct linkages with the HRM community safety office around issues around homelessness and that sort of thing, in terms of which we already do, but this would, I think, would bolster that initiative, because I think it's important that we understand that I don't believe this is an either or situation for response. It requires a collaborative response from both the community safety office and the police department, which I fully support. And I also want to go back on that and say I also fully support a viable alternative response for the majority of mental health calls that we actually get to be outside of the police framework. But I think that there's still a requirement for police response in specific instances. Next slide, please. The next proposal speaks to the executive office and the civilian investigator positions within the background security unit. As you are aware, council had mandated not using the polygraph anymore in relation to the use of new hires. The result is that it's become it's a labor intensive process in terms of getting people through the security process. It's a comprehensive background review, and it's obviously I think the hiring of personnel is one of the most important things we do, and we need to get it right. And I think that the unit actually does a great job, but it takes a significant amount of person hours to accomplish that goal. And what we've seen currently, we actually have somebody seconded from patrol be able to get through the amount of persons that we have to deal with. And I think that places undue pressure on the patrol. So when I talk about supporting the front line, this is actually an indirect augmentation of that by actually allowing those who are in patrol or stay in patrol and sufficiently funding those important areas around security clearance that I think we need. Next slide, please. The hate crime unit. This is a previous ask from that review of past submissions. One constable position to investigate reports of hate crimes and hate incidents, and that we trained as a subject matter expert. What we know nationally is that hate crime incidents and crimes are on the rise. We also know that they are most likely very much underreported. We know that the numbers within Halifax Regional Police in 2023 have already surpassed those of 2022, which surpassed those of 2021. And with a growing population, particularly with an impact with a focus on densification, both in the core and reliance on immigration. I think that these issues are already going to expand. I think it's important that we address this situation. Next, also as well, this speaks to issues around the police transformation study in terms of we also provide support within the RCMP areas as well. So I think that's an important point for that. Next slide. Police science program obviously is an important piece. As I talk about new bodies, part of this, well, where are you going to get them from? Part of the discussions around the police science program. We understand that we have potentially over 200 retirements in the next 5 to 6 years. We understand that we're going to have to run in-house police science programs probably for the next 7 to 8 years at least. And what we normally do is we second from patrol to fill these positions. And I think that we need to establish these positions well within our cost model and our framework to ensure that we can actually cut down the amount of time between classes. So as when one's running, we're starting to get the next one up and running as well. And in terms of that, we're not drawing resources from the patrol environment anymore or other areas of the organization in order to run this program, which I think is extremely important to the success and ongoing future of our organization. Next slide. Certainly this is last but not least, but in terms of member wellness is extremely important. The EFAP, Employee and Family Assistance Program Coordinator. What we do know is employee referrals, so that is referrals to the EFAP have doubled since probably 2016. We know that we are again above more referrals this year than we had last year already. We understood that we needed to put a second person into EFAP. We've done so. We seconded one from the front line. In this particular case from IES as an IES dispatcher. And we understand that, this is something that we're going to have to continue to do because, at the end of the day, we're going to have to end up calling EFAP for our EFAP people. So we need to understand that is sufficiently resourced. Next slide. So this slide just speaks to the proposed service enhancements for 24-25. Patrol Division 18 constables, which are split between patrol and the CRO office, 1 constable in the hate crime unit, a sergeant and constable in police science, the executive office, two investigators. I say civilian investigators because we believe that we should be able to go back in and look at retirees or something similar as the contract allows to be able to perform that function. It's very similar to what the RCMP does, and as well 1 EFAP coordinator, which could in fact be civilian. It's just that it is costed in our wage model as a constable's position by contract. Next slide. I brought the body worn video piece back. There was a BOPC report in 2020 in relation to the cost and benefits to body worn video. There was funding approved in 21-22 for a 12-month position, which was never filled for various reasons. So I brought this back for direction from the board in relation to where they wanted the body worn program to go going forward. And there was a motion at the last meeting to include it in a costing model to bring forward for consideration. And again, it's important to note that the RCMP locally and provincially will be getting into the body worn video business at some point in the near future. And it's my hope that we will work closely with them in relation to policy implementation and the implementation of the program as well. Next slide. This just speaks to the next steps. We will return to the BOPC with additional budget information that was asked for at the meeting on the 15th. On November 22nd, there was another in-person public consultation in relation to that document, and on November 29th, so far is the proposal to bring the operating budget to the budget committee. And next slide, which is thank you, and that was my basically synopsis of last week's presentation, and I turn it back over to you, Mr. Vice Chair. I think you're still chairing the meeting.
Thank you, Chief. I'll just look to our commissioners for questions of clarification. I see Commissioner Giles. You're on mute.
Is that any better? Thanks. Chief, thanks very much for that. I appreciate the fact that I'm a little bit behind the 8 ball because I wasn't present for last week. And so my understanding of the difference between last week's presentation and this week's presentation might not be all that it could be. But I've got a couple of questions, if you don't mind. And the first one focuses on the 12 constables and the breakdown on their requirement. And I don't want to quibble with you on the requirement because you're the expert in this field and I'm not. But I'd like to know, generally speaking, if you can speak to it now. And if you can't, if this is something that will come later, that's fine. But I'd like to know if you can speak to it now, what that breakdown of the 12 would be between mental health calls, hospital waits, and patrol. And I realize there may be some crossover between mental health calls and hospital waits.
Yeah, no, certainly. To you, Commissioner. So I guess overall, I look at it in terms is bolstering the frontline response in terms of these would be patrol officers. They would have some enhanced training around some mental health calls when they were on the street. And again, it is to bolster the daily resource and requirements of the shift that have been thus far in the last being used. Overtime has been part of our solution. The other part to that is, like I say, we take approximately, so in 2023, 653, I believe. So about 1.8 persons per day that go to the hospital in relation to mental health calls, where we're taking them under statutory authority, and we're now required to stay with them until such time that they are either committed or released from the hospital. So we spend significant amount of hours within the hospital, amounting up to 4,000, depending on whether it's 1 or 2 persons in the hospital at one particular time. This would allow us to have dedicated folks when they are working that has specific training that can actually go to the hospital. So we could have 1 person there rather than 3 or 4 or whatever amount it is. And part of that has to do with the pilot with the actual hospital that allows through some structural changes with rooms and video and all that other sorts of thing that would allow us to mitigate some of those hours we actually spend in the hospital and allow our other patrol officers to actually remain on the streets and doing other good work.
The question is an open one about whether police constables, regardless of their training, are the best suited personnel to deal with those in the throes of mental health crisis. And this session is not an appropriate place, and this time is not an appropriate time for that debate. But there is pushback from generally from some members of the public on that notion. But I'm intrigued by the comment that there's a statutory requirement that an officer who deems or who at least has suspicion about somebody being in a mental health crisis such that she or he might do harm to themselves or harm to somebody else within the community is required to stay with that person in the hospital. I've looked for that statutory requirement and I don't see that. And even if I did, is that not something that we should be in discussion with DOH about? Why are municipal police officers in hospitals providing services that should be provided interstitially within the hospital setting by those best trained for that? Is that something that we've looked at, or is it simply that we're going to continue to, for lack of better terminology, and I don't mean to be disparaging or to use a pejorative, but babysit those people who may be requiring of mental health services? It just seems to me that there's so many better ways that that could be accomplished other than using police officers who have to be recruited, trained, paid, and then supported.
You're to the counselor. You're asking a question we've asked for quite some time, actually, in terms of there's actually been some there was some discussion that they were going to change the requirements of the ICT Act that may have addressed that. It hasn't quite come to fruition. I understand there may have even been a motion at the last meeting about having someone to speak to this to the board in some particular part. But I can tell you that there certainly is a legislative requirement within the act that requires us to do so. I don't have the exact number here right in front of me, but it's certainly something that we've been attuned to for quite some time. But I think, you know, back to your other piece about, I fully support a viable alternative for a great deal of mental health response calls, and in terms of, but having said that, I also understand that there will be those times as well that the police are going to have to be involved, and particularly in those ones where we take people under arrest to the hospital for specific reasons. Like I said, of the 4,000 plus EDP forms that we put in last year, 600 of them relate to actually people that we take to the hospital. So there's a significant other number that potentially could be dealt with in a different way. But sometimes you don't know that until you actually get there. And the other part is around, but we do have a requirement in terms of those ones who we do believe that will create a harm to themselves or others, that we have to take some necessary statutory direction to. Here we go. Section 16.2 of the IPTA. The peace officer or other authorized individuals should remain at the place of himself. But that's the piece.
Okay.
Well, I'm not a teenager and I shouldn't speak in teenage vernacular, but if I were to do so, I would say that's dumb. And as Mr. Bumble said in Dickens, if that's the law, then the law's an ass. One other question, Chief, and then I'm going to move on.
Because this one, let Commissioner Blackburn ask a question. It's been 5 minutes, and you can come back if that's all right.
Sure.
All right, thanks so much. So Commissioner Blackburn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. So I guess just to sort of piggyback on what Commissioner Giles was asking. So it is provincial law that even if there is no crime committed, you're attending a mental health call and that person has to go to hospital, even if there's no crime that has been committed, you legally have to stay with them. You cannot give a handoff to a social worker or any other mentally health trained personnel. You must stay with them until they have been medically cleared from a doctor. That's question one. And question two about the 12 constables, just want to confirm something that I think was said at the last meeting. These 12 constables would have a more robust mental health training than what a general officer would have. I left that meeting with the understanding that these 12 constables would have mental health training, the equivalent of staff on the mobile mental health team right now. Thank you.
Yes, to the counselor. Yes, that would be, because they would spend an inordinate amount of time with people in mental health distress, that it would be our expectation and my goal to ensure that they are trained similar to those of our officers that are in the mobile mental health unit, with some CIT training and such that's similar to that. To speak to your first question, again, the person has to be arrested by an officer to be taken there, and that arrest has to be on the basis that at the time they believe they're suffering some mental distress, and at the same time either present a danger to themselves or others, or committing a crime in relation to that, to their mental issue. But yes, the act itself. So I've had the deputy bring up the actual words. It says, the peace officer authorized individual shall remain at the place of the medical examination and shall retain custody of the person until the medical examination is completed.
All right.
And it also speaks to that if they're released, and it also speaks to if they actually released, we actually have to then take them back to where we got them from.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the clarification. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. Just look if there's any other commissioners for questions of clarification before I go back to Commissioner Johnson. Okay, seeing none, Mr. Johnson, you have another question here?
Chief, I understand that significant effort has been undertaken over the last decade or so to train police constables in-house. I understand that there's been a lot of assessment done and the conclusion made that that's the best form of training and recruitment for our police officers. But I'm concerned about the fact that the significant cost of vetting these candidates for the appropriateness for the role is being borne to some extent by the taxpayer, as opposed to being borne in its entirety by the candidate. Is there any reason for that?
Can you just reframe what you said?
Sure. I
Not sure
understood
exactly.
that. I understood that one of the reasons for two specially trained constables on the recruitment end, or specially trained investigators on the recruitment end, was to vet candidates for admission as sworn police officers. I might not have had that correctly, but you're nodding affirmatively, so I think I did. And
It would be not just police officers, everyone we hire, all hire.
But why is that expense not paid by the person seeking employment?
Well, I would suggest that, so for a candidate in our in-house science class, they actually do pay a cost. They pay a significant cost in terms of what their tuition is, I guess, for lack of a better word. In terms of other hires, I'm not familiar with the process of charging individuals to apply to our department for whatever that job may be, whether it's an admin assistant or what have you. At the end of the day, I think we have a responsibility to ensure that we do the best job in terms of vetting employees, and because it is hiring employees is one of the most important things we do. We have to make sure we get it right.
Oh yeah, there's no question about that. My only concern is who pays for it at the end of the day, whether it's the candidate seeking employment or whether it's the taxpayer who's got to fund it through the methods being proposed currently. Anyway, I don't think we'll answer that question today. I just raise it as an issue.
No, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I saw Commissioner Smith had a question.
Thanks, Vice Chair and Chief for the presentation. I was late putting my hand up because I was trying to find the minutes from the meeting when we received the presentation from Nova Scotia Health, where they talked about the mental health calls and data, and I couldn't find it quick enough. But I do remember when we were speaking on the IPTA, and I forget the gentleman's name who presented to us on behalf of Nova Scotia Health. He spoke about the thought and the need for that act to be reviewed. And Chief, because I think Commissioner Giles mentioned it, there was discussion to look at changing that act. And I thought, and that's why I was trying to find the minutes, I thought that we and it might not have been a motion, it might just have been an ask. I thought we did ask that would be looked at in preparation of moving forward with budget, understanding that asks were coming forward. So I'm just, and again, this was the previous chief, so maybe you weren't aware of these conversations. So I'm just wondering if you do remember or are aware of where those conversations are related to being able to have civilians take over for police once they arrive at the hospital.
So to the council, yes, I'm familiar that there were conversations and discussions around changing the act itself. I don't believe there's been any fruition in terms that have impacted this actual specific discussion. Actually, I was hopeful that there would be. I don't think that that's actually taken place. And in terms of the act itself speaks to authorized people. Authorized persons could be a lot of different persons in terms of but we could have that's a different discussion, I think, in terms of who is most suitable, I think, to be there in those particular occasions. Again, I speak to the point of, the people who are being arrested and taken to the hospital are being done so for a reason, because they, there is a specific reason why that's taking place. And so we just have to be mindful of that situation. But in terms of the actual act itself, I don't think there have been any substantive changes that have actually addressed this particular situation.
Right. And the only reason I asked that just related to the budget piece, because I just want to make sure we stay there, is because with those asks, there are positions that you're asking to specifically be trained to be able to deal with those calls. So, and I know that we did have that discussion of hoping that maybe we could look at civilian members within the community safety or public safety strategy. So if that's gone nowheres, then that just means that I'll have to figure out where the follow-up is, and maybe that's something I'll leave with you, as well as we move forward with the budget discussions, finding out where those conversations were, who were the point people, because I think that would be helpful as well if we had that. So we'll leave it there, and I guess I think that's it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'll just note it's been referenced. So I brought up a notice of motion at the previous meeting, suggesting first that we write to the minister about our concerns around YIPTA. And then it was Chief Superintendent Christie who very helpfully noted that where there's so many changes in the works currently at the provincial level, that perhaps we have someone from the province come in, and that was a very helpful suggestion. And when we do have our next regular meeting, I'll be bringing that motion. So I just wanted to clarify that it was referenced.
And if I could just add one piece in terms of this is not a Halifax police issue. In fact, this is not even a Nova Scotia police issue. I had occasion to host the chief of Vancouver and the deputy of Vancouver today in my office. They deal with the exact same issue because their act is written extremely very similar. They deal with the exact same issue.
Certainly, Chief. And I mean, I think that, obviously we'd like to see the changes made. Either, and it's interesting to me even to say that the inclusion of authorized individual, maybe it's not so much about changing legislation, but adding regulations to dictate who that is. But so I think that should be something this board should look at, working with the department on changes. But if that's not possible, and I've already indicated before that we need to look at the act itself, and can you have non-sworn peace officers, for instance, like you do in the prisoner care facility? Chief, I'm just going to ask a couple of questions of clarification. Some of these relate to things I asked you about last meeting. So the first was, I raised the concern I had that the number of calls to the mobile mental health crisis team is increasing significantly, and the number of in-person visits, unfortunately, is going down. So my question was, you had said, well, look, I'd love to spend more money on this team, but the need is in respect of the clinicians. So I'm wondering if you could say kind of what conversations there are going on in regards to, on the provincial side, increasing the number of clinicians attached to that program. So that'd be question one. And then my second question is in relation to both the civilian investigators to do the background work and the EFAP coordinator. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about if there was any consideration as to having those positions housed in human resources. I know, for instance, last year there was a big discussion around the police psychologist position. And ultimately, I know there was a sort of compromise reached at council where that position was funded to some extent within human resources, but had a sort of broader mandate and, broadened to include things like fire. So I wondered if you could just talk about, a possible consideration of whether that's been considered or thought about in terms of locating those positions in within HR.
So to be clear, when you say HR, I assume you're talking about corporate HR, not PHR.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have to remember your first question again now. With the mobile mental health piece. Yeah.
Yes.
So I have not had any recent conversations in relation to the mobile mental health piece. I know Superintendent Christie has, in terms of his attempts to try to get his agency involved in the mobile mental health piece. I'm just not aware of any initiative on their behalf to increase their clinician resourcing at this particular time. To the second piece, in terms of, at the end of the day, the responsibility upon hiring police officers or people to the within the Halifax Regional Police lies with me. That's my responsibility. And in terms of we do get support from corporate HR in regards to certain initiatives along the way, but I think when it comes to issues around background checks and the kind of information that they would have to be privy to in terms of systems and all that other stuff, it's important that it be someone from the organization. EFAP again, it's a very delicate position in terms of what they do, and in terms of it's a very special people. We have a number of volunteer staff that actually have other jobs within the organization that are volunteer referral agents. And in terms of, the coordinator, as we looked over the years in terms of coordinators, it said that the policing environment, particularly in terms of there's a great trust factor in terms that's involved in there, in terms of that there was an issue that at one point it was like we had to have a police officer, then we had civilians within the agency as well. But in terms of, I think it's very important to keep some of that stuff in-house in terms of its effectiveness, certainly around the volunteer coordinators and the information that they're privy to, and know that I've never had any discussions in relation to with outside of with HRM in relation to what support they could provide. I'm not really sure what they could.
Yeah, if I could jump in, Vice Chair, as well. And I believe the HRM model is contracted out to an insurance company. I could be wrong on that. And as the Chief said, there's some cultural in-house sensitivities that we're aware of, and the trust of the employees is important. And them knowing the EFAP coordinator is very important to build that trust. So when it's contracted out, we lose that. And I think we've even seen in Ontario, when they've done reviews of their EFAP program, they've recommended going back to in-person peer referrals, peer supports, as opposed to the contracting out.
Okay, I appreciate that. I see the CEO has her hand up, so I'll let the CEO jump in.
Yes, I just wanted to confirm that our corporate EFAP is contracted out to Homewood Health. HRP members can have access to that, as well as EFAP through what HRP provides, which I would say, they're able to provide something more specialized and appropriate for police officers than they would get through that general corporate program. But HRP does have access to the corporate program also.
Thanks, CEO, and thank you for answering my questions. I'll just see if there's any other commissioners who have questions. Commissioner Blackburn, Commissioner Smith, if you had a second question, or Chair Kent. Oh. Okay, well, I appreciate it, Chief. Thank you for the presentation. And I think Chair Kent wants to take over again as the chair for audio is working.
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay, good. Yep, I'm on my phone and my laptop, and neither one are perfect. But thank you, Harry, for taking that on, and we've now finished that piece of the agenda. So next we'll have the public consultation section of the meeting. As a reminder to those watching from home, in order to have signed up as a speaker, the deadline was 4:30 p.m. the business day prior, which was yesterday. We have 15 speakers signed up for today's meeting. Any member of the public who is registered with the clerk's office on this matter will be given 5 minutes to address the topic. When I call your name, you may unmute your mic and begin speaking. The first 3 speakers are Jamie Livingston, Ursula Prosseger, and Lou Campbell. Jamie, are you in the meeting? Andrea, just so I understand what's happening here, we should hear Jamie's audio, but not necessarily his video. Is that correct?
Both the audio and the video should work. I've just promoted him. Let me just verify that he's promoted.
I can see him.
He's here now.
Okay, Jamie, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Okay, great. Good evening, Chair and members of the board. Thanks for providing an opportunity to provide feedback on the HRP's operating budget framework. My name is Dr. Jamie Livingston. I'm a resident of District 8. As well, I'm an associate professor of criminology at St. Mary's University. My work often calls attention to the harms that are created by carceral and coercive interventions that target people with mental health and substance use issues, including police-based crisis response services. I'm speaking today to urge the board to reject the HRP's budget framework and propose service enhancements that seek additional funding to hire 12 new officers that will be deployed to mental health calls and hospital waiting rooms. Such a proposal is not aligned with the priorities and recommendations articulated in HRM's public safety strategy, the policing model transformation study, the Defund the Police report, or the Mass Casualty Commission's final report. All of these policy documents highlight the inappropriateness of police being first responders to mental health calls and other social inequity issues. They call for creating and investing in community-led non-police approaches, including establishing civilian crisis response programs that divert calls away from police and instead rapidly bring care and support to people in need wherever they are in the community. Today, civilian crisis response programs have been successfully established in more than 220 communities worldwide, including several Canadian cities such as Toronto, Victoria, Edmonton, and soon in Ottawa. These programs are demonstrating that unarmed civilians can safely respond to crisis calls without police presence and effectively support people in the community in ways that prevent unnecessary police intervention and arrests, ambulance transports, emergency room visits, involuntary apprehensions, and hospital admissions, all while greatly enhancing community safety and well-being. I'm pleased that Halifax will be taking steps to develop its own community response program, which will take pressure off police, ambulance services, emergency rooms, as well as the Halifax police-involved mental health mobile crisis team. Establishing a civilian crisis response program is a good investment. It's cost-effective and it's consistent with community norms and best practices, and it's the right thing to do. However, the HRP's proposed budget frameworks undermines this effort in several ways. First, the proposal elevates a police-based approach to responding to mental health calls at a time when there's been repeated demands to prioritize investments in community-based approaches. Second, the proposal diverts significant funding away from developing community-based approaches and achieving the goals that are articulated in HRM's public safety strategy and other policy documents. Third, the proposal does not reflect community needs and values. There is strong, widespread community support for shifting away from police-based approaches when it comes to responding to mental health calls and other social inequity issues. I was pleased to hear Chief McLean at the last Board of Police Commissioners meeting and at today's meeting publicly state his full support of establishing community-led civilian-delivered programs to respond to the vast majority of mental health calls. However, I'm also frustrated by the short-sightedness and thinness of the budget framework that not only lacks sufficient details to understand the rationale, but also ignores the existing policy context and does not reflect the priorities of the municipality as is articulated in the public safety strategy. There are strong signs that a civilian crisis response program will be established in HRM. With adequate resources and support, such a program will relieve many of the service pressures that were described by the chief during his presentation to the board, and will also reduce demand on Halifax's police-involved mental health mobile crisis team. Given this, I believe that it's prudent for the board to hold off on approving any new investments that scale up police-based responses to mental health calls, including adding new officers or
30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. Increasing the capacity of Halifax's police-involved mental health mobile crisis team. Instead, I urge the board to fully support a shared priority of the community and the municipality, which is to broaden the spectrum of emergency crisis response services, including civilian-delivered crisis response program. happy to answer any questions. If you'd like to learn more, you can visit my website at justmentalhealth.ca. I'm also open to giving a more fulsome presentation to the board about this subject at any time. Thanks.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate that. Are there any questions or clarification from the board? I see Commissioner Critchley.
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 questions of clarification. The first, Dr. Livingstone, if you could just say, you indicated that you felt no more details were needed to better understand the rationale behind some of the requests. That was something that came up in our last meeting. So if you could give a sense about what that sort of detail would be in your estimation that would be necessary, that would be question 1. My second question is, obviously you're someone who has a lot of experience with these sorts of civilian programs around Canada. And I wondered if you had a sense as to, just at a broad level, what the sort of costing would be for a civilian-led program in a city of comparable size.
Thanks for the question. In relation to the first question about further details needing to understand the request for service enhancements, I did watch the last presentation at the last Board of Police Commissioners meeting, as well as this presentation. And I don't see any kind of indication of trends. So, within the past 5 years, what does the pattern of calls look like? And as well, what does the time spent in emergency rooms rather look like in relation to what has happened over the past, like 5 years or something like that? So I see snapshots of information and data without sort of indicating any trends, which I think is important to understand the context for the ask. And I think your question related to the role of the mental health mobile crisis team, and despite the fact that they're increasing calls to the team and a decreasing number of in-person visits is a really important point as well. I'd also look for more data on bringing people to hospital. The police have very few tools when they respond to mental health crisis calls. Tools that are available to other community crisis teams, for example, to actually support people who are in the community. So one of the few tools that police have is to transport people to hospital. That's what they're equipped to do. And so I struggle to know whether or not these transports could have been prevented if there were community services that were attending to people in the community and were properly resourced to support people in the community to prevent hospitalizations. That's what we see in other jurisdictions. Just quickly as to the costing.
I was just going to ask you to wrap up, but if you've got something more specific to what you were referring to in relation to asking the chief, I'll let you finish that thought.
I was going to answer the second question just quickly, but
okay.
The question was in relation to costing. I don't have that off the top of my head, although both Toronto and Victoria and Ottawa have developed costing for establishing and implementing pilots in their cities. And so there's many programs where this information is readily available, and I just don't have that at the top of my head.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any further questions of clarification? Seeing none, we'll now move on to Ursula Prosseger, followed by Lou Campbell, and then Kristen McDonald. Ursula, are you in the meeting? Ursula, just checking to see if you're in the meeting. Okay,
Good afternoon. Can you hear me now?
Can hear you, yes.
Okay, I do have let me see my video off, share screen. I'm not a Zoom expert here, so here we go. Found it.
Okay, there you are.
Good afternoon.
Your 5 minutes will start right now.
Okay. My name is Ursula Prossiger. My family owns and operates properties in downtown Dartmouth, and all my family members, including myself, live in downtown. I own Urchin Property Management, which manages over 1,000 units in the metro area, with 80% of my portfolio lying in the affordable housing range. It has taken decades of hard work, money, and a strong sense of community to turn downtown Dartmouth into a vibrant destination. In my 15 years of working in the housing industry, I have experienced more situations than I care to think of on what it means to have government support or lack thereof. Especially since COVID-19, when mental health and societal issues became magnified while government services closed and police and fire services vastly reduced, I had to deal with high acuity individuals causing chaos in building communities. During this time and since then, there has been no real enforcement of rules and no consequences for any wrongdoing. It became so bad that in June 2020, I drove to the police headquarters in Burnside for help, only to find a note on the front door saying closed due to COVID-19. Please contact the Halifax headquarters. Fast track to October 2023. Downtown Dartmouth has become home to approximately 7,000 people. We are surrounded by shelters, encampments, and hangout areas for homeless. Drawing a line from location to location on a map, you end up with a noose that chokes the life, vibrancy, safety, and security out of our beautiful area. It is unbelievable how the government can think it is a good idea to house a large concentration of high acuity individuals in a small area without support, supervision, and law enforcement. Rental property owners are strictly regulated by municipal bylaws, fire safety regulations, and provincial laws such as the Residential Tenancy Act. With its hands-off approach to dealing with the homeless and defunding public services such as law enforcement, HRM is not only disrespectful to its law-abiding tax-paying citizens, but it is also doing a huge disservice to high-needs people. Where property owners such as myself and my clients receive orders to comply from HRM Fire to remove propane tanks, barbecues, or tires due to the high risk of fire, tent encampments are left alone and unsupervised. We receive letters from HRM threatening heavy fines for unsightly premises, while we must endure garbage-filled tent encampments, used needles, and human feces in our beautiful downtown area. One of the statutory conditions of the Residential Tenancy Act states that tenants have the right to peaceful enjoyment of their homes. If downtown Dartmouth were a building community, the residents and businesses, the tenants, and the municipality, the landlord, then HRM has failed to comply with this very important statute. In the last 2 years, our insurance rates have increased by 59%. And to quote our insurer this year, there's a lot of foot traffic in this area from less desirable folks. And if it wasn't a high foot traffic area, we would be less concerned. Every property we own or manage has been vandalized, experienced theft, or the residents terrorized by street people. We have spent thousands of dollars on more security measures such as cameras and access control systems. We have repaired costly damage caused by high acuity individuals either off the street or from our own tenant base. We have had to discontinue central laundry services due to numerous break-ins. We have dealt with and cleaned up tent encampments from private property. And we have witnessed HRM's refusal to deal with high-risk behavior involving a tent encampment in a culvert abutting private property. And to quote one counselor, HRM will not evict homeless from public property. I have witnessed HRM's inaction to help a homeless person sleeping on the ground during a hurricane and across from my personal residence, only 18 feet away.
30 seconds remaining.
Okay, what we need is a reduction in tent encampments and shelters in our downtown core. We need an active and highly visible police presence with quick response times in our community and business districts. We need a plan to implement consequences on those individuals and repeat offenders, such as removing them from shelters and encampments in our community until they are rehabilitated. daytime supervision, therapy, and resource center for shelter and tent residents. Foot patrol through our business district. More foot patrol through tent encampments by police, street navigators, and social workers. Screening and registration not only of shelter residents, but also those living in tent encampments. Individuals with criminal records of assault and murder should not be permitted to live in shelters without full supervision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any commissioners who would like to? Oh, I've lost here for a second. There we are. Have any questions of clarification? And seeing none.
I'm sorry, Chair. You might not see the chat because of your computer situation.
Sorry, yes. For today, can you please put your hand up? That's going to be a little. Thank you.
I'll do that.
Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for being here, Ursula. So I'm wondering, related to the police budget, as part of the engagement we're doing here, what feedback do you have related to the information that you heard from the presentation from the chief today, related to your concerns?
Can you rephrase that question? I just want to make sure I understood it correctly.
Yeah, so today the focus is on the HRP's business plan and budget.
Yes.
So I'm wondering what your concerns that you brought forward today, how that translate to the information that we're trying to receive today.
Okay, so I see there is a request for more constables. I applaud that. I would fully support that. I see a real need for a community police office actually in the downtown area. We had one actually, which was financed by Alderney Gate during the summer months. And all of us, my commercial and my residential tenants, noticed a significant improvement in calming down of incidents while we had, police presence in the community. And I have to say, I really do understand there's a lot of concern about too much police or police brutality or whatever. I have only ever had good experiences with the Halifax Regional Police headquarters when I've needed them. And I have only ever witnessed them trying to, do their best in a lot of quite serious situations. And having dealt with a lot of tenants with mental health issues, I have been in situations where a police officer had to be present. One of my staff members years ago was almost stabbed by a tenant who was having, a mental breakdown. I am not sure, and I'm not the professional or the expert, how well a social worker is going to be trained for dealing with situations like that. I do really hope that the police gets the staffing it needs. I have been dealing with a lack of staff resources since COVID hit us, and I miss those foot patrols, and a lot of the residents, including my apartment residents and my businesses, miss it too, because it's not a bad thing. It's actually, I grew up with it was great to know your local police officer. If we didn't have a community police officer 10 years ago with our community meetings, we wouldn't have been able to, for lack of better words, clean up the neighborhoods to make our area nice for a lot more people to live in, right? So.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands up and nothing in. Oh, yeah, Lindell, there's your thing. So thank you very much, Ursula. Now call upon Lou Campbell, followed by Kristen McDonald, Sandra McKenzie. Lou, are you in the meeting? There you are. Okay. You may go ahead, and your 5 minutes will start now.
Hi, my name is Lou Campbell. I live in District 8. I'm here to voice my opposition to the proposed increase to the police budget. I noticed that this budget does reflect a truth that the police are tasked with too much at the moment. And specifically, they're tasked with responding to mental health crisis calls. And this is not something they should be tasked with. I don't really understand why this budget seeks to give the police more money to solve that issue. Not really sure how that works. I don't think that will rectify the issue. It's not an effective use of our money, taxpayer money. In my experience, the HRP has proven many, many times that they are not capable of taking on mental health crisis calls. And it's also clear to me that further training does not equal better practices. Even when they surveil their behavior with body cams, it does not equal better practices. In my experience, they've proven time and time again that their workplace is rife with racism and structural oppression. Even taking on the further training to help with this has not really done much. And I've seen it with my own eyes. I live down the street from the police station here. I had someone enter my home who was having a mental health crisis without my permission, and I had no one to call because I don't trust the police. I ended up having to sequester them on my deck for an hour while I had to try to think of a solution on the fly. And that solution that I came up with was more helpful until I ended up having to call the police because the mental health crisis unit that's connected to the police told me to call them. So there's really no one to call in these situations. And I knew it was going to go badly when I called them, and it did, but I was left with no choice. When I called them, the dispatcher was escalating the situation. They were rude to me on the phone. The police came into my home, completely destroyed my home, tore it apart, traumatized me, traumatized the people in my neighborhood, traumatized, most importantly, the person who had a mental health crisis. They don't listen to you, and they don't listen to reason. They storm in with violence and anger. And that might not be the case if you're a person who owns or runs 1,000 properties in the city, but it's certainly the case if you are marginalized, you are not treated well, and you're not treated with respect. They stormed into my apartment, as I said, and I almost got arrested for obstruction of justice. All that said, I don't think that it's effective to give them any more money. And you might say, well, they might have more training. It's enough. When someone acts this harmfully, it's time to pass the baton and put the money elsewhere. It's not okay that so many people live in fear of this institution that's tasked with public safety. They're the last people I would trust with my safety. They make me feel scared. They make me feel unsafe. And my tax money is paying for that. So I think it's time to make a change. And there's so many ways that money could be used to help people, even though those people might be causing a ruckus in the community. There's better ways to help them. So they could have better access to shelters. They could have housing support. They could have well-trained, nonviolent mental health crisis support teams. All of that costs money. So why are we wasting money that is so sorely needed on cops? They've proven time and time again, it's a terrible investment with bad returns. I don't understand why rising costs that they talked about in their presentation a little bit is a reason to receive more funding when that's not a reason for other people to receive more funding. As the police themselves state, support is needed for frontline response. So let's support that by rerouting money to other places, to other frontline response, not cops, not police. Another world is possible, but you have to invest in it. And so I'm really sick and tired of seeing cops get money that they don't deserve. I urge the board to reject this budget proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of clarification? Not seeing any hands up. Thank you very much, Lou. Kristen McDonald, it's your turn. I'm wondering if you are in the meeting, and this will be followed by Sandra McKenzie and then Libby Douglas. Kristen McDonald, just checking to see if you are in the meeting or attempting to be in the meeting. One more try for Kristen, and then I'll move forward to Sandra McKenzie, and we will revisit Kristen when we have the chance.
I think Chair Kristen is just about to join. I see that their mic's now active.
Okay. Kristen, can you speak to us? Okay, we're not having any luck. So Sandra, I just want you to be aware that you may be called upon very shortly.
So Kristen, if you are having issues, can you please telephone the phone number on the Zoom link email for some technical assistance? And then the chair will call upon you after our next speaker.
So at this point, Sandra McKenzie, you are invited to the meeting for the next presentation, followed by Libby Douglas. Sandra, are you in the meeting or attempting? Andrea, can you see any activity for Sandra?
I see that Sandra is in as a panelist. She might just need to unmute her mic.
Okay,
Unmuted.
there's Sandra.
Unmuted and just waiting for the camera. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Sandra, your 5 minutes will start now.
Thank you. I just want to say to Lou that I'm sorry that happened to you. You're going to hear me talking about community policing, and that's what we need in our community. Hello, my name is Sandra McKenzie. I'm a volunteer and chair of the Alderney Landing Board. Annually, Alderney Landing produces 600 events, attracting 400,000 people to our theater, market, gallery, and outdoor events here in downtown Dartmouth. In 2022, as the unhoused numbers grew in the metro area, a significant infusion of new shelters and services were added to a very small geographic area in downtown Dartmouth. Modulars were added and nearby parks were designated as tent encampments. This year, a 6-story hotel has been converted into the province's largest shelter. Response from the community was initially supportive and welcoming, but as more and more people and services have been added, the density of need has overwhelmed the capacity of the community to provide support. As the need grew beyond capacity to respond, there was a corresponding and significant increase in theft, assault, violent crimes, including arson, harassment, and swarming of residents, business owners, and patrons. The unhoused population in downtown Dartmouth includes high acuity individuals suffering from serious mental health challenges and drug addictions who are also living in unsafe conditions. Fortunately, HRM recognized this escalating pressure and the need for increased security and provided Alderney Landing with funding to create a new position for a facility monitor. And her name is Robin Foley, and she has developed very good relationships with the people in the surrounding community. But they do have experience violent outbreaks, and that is beyond the capacity of an unarmed support person. But however, Robin Foley, in partnership with the community police officer and the street navigator assigned to downtown Dartmouth, downtown Halifax, Woodside, and the north end of Halifax, work together to coordinate efforts and help people while maintaining a safe environment for Alderney Landing. In addition to creating a new safety position in response to the Alderney Landing experience, which we were experiencing 5 to 6 significant incidents each day, Alderney Landing staff also formed an internal committee with partners in the Alderney campus, including HRM, Alderney Gate Library, and the ferry terminal. The committee works to address immediate needs and seek long-term solutions, including sharing information and developing an acceptable code of conduct. To support safety efforts, Alderney Landing made a request to HRM Corporate Services to have what we refer to as a circuit breaker intervention. Circuit breakers do just that. They break patterns of behavior to prevent escalation. Circuit breaking is proactive, effective, and creates safer environments for all. Although corporate services did not have a budgetary line to support this effort, they found a way to hire community police officers to act as circuit breakers in April 2023. Our community police officer covered the area from the McDonald Bridge to Woodside on weekdays from 7 to 3. Extra police officer brought in from 3 to 9. Initially, we began with 1 officer, but for the safety of the officer, a second was added due to swarming and other safety risks. Community policing reduced violent incidents from 5 to 6 incidents a day to only a few per week. Alderney can attest community policing works. Unfortunately, corporate services funding expired in June, which happened to coincide with the Alderney Landing entering its peak season, a time when we welcome over 200,000 people for a full season of outdoor events. In order to ensure that the community, facility, vendors, patrons, and the unhoused that are around us had no choice but to hire off-duty police officers over the summer. This was over and above the policing services we already hire for each of our events. Fortunately, corporate services found a way to help Alderney again by cost sharing the extra officers over the summer. However, corporate services in Alderney now found themselves with budgets that are completely exhausted. We do not have the financial resources, and we need to keep the community, facility, vendors, and the individuals who have addiction and mental health requirements safe. The safety and law enforcement of the waterfront and downtown Dartmouth is not Alderney Landing's mandate. But in order to continue to operate programming at our market events, hold our events, the gallery and the theater, we have continued to act. We've been very fortunate that retired Director General of Veterans Affairs, Libby Douglas, has volunteered to step up as the inaugural chair of the Proactive Community Safety Committee. Libby will be speaking to describe how the committee has engaged residents, businesses, service providers, and other community members to make the community safe for all. On behalf of the volunteer board of directors, staff, patrons, and clients, and in support of the unhoused in the downtown Dartmouth district, we ask you to give the HRP the community-based resource they need to keep our community safe and inclusive. I'm going to hand that over to Libby Douglas, unless there's any questions for me.
Any questions? Clarification? Seeing none. Before we go to Libby, I just want to check in one more time for Kristen McDonald. Have we made any progress with Kristen? Andrea?
I believe Kristen was going to check the audio settings in Zoom, which can be found in the up arrow on the mic on the bottom right-hand screen of the Zoom screen. So she just needs to activate the speakers and the microphone for the computer she's using.
Okay, well, we'll move on to Libby Douglas while she's working through that, Libby, and that would be followed, if we aren't able to get Kristen, that will be followed by Willa Oakes and then T. Chandler Halliburton.
Chair, do we
Libby,
want to see if Kristen can use her mic now?
Sure.
Libby is following on from my presentation. I don't know how you want to handle that.
Libby, so to clarify, Sandra, are you sharing your time with her?
She was listed as a separate speaker, but she was to come in after me after I said my piece, and I said I was turning it over to Libby. She's she leads the Community Proactive Safety Committee. So
yes. So she signed up separately, so we'll continue to go through our list.
Okay.
We didn't know about that requirements, so at this stage, though we're not seeing or hearing from Kristen, so it actually works out well. Libby, if you're there, we're going to go to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Libby, are you able to join the meeting? There she is.
Hi there. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Sandra, for that introduction, and thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Libby Douglas, and I serve as a volunteer with Alderney Landing. In June of this past year, I was asked by Alderney Landing to chair a proactive safety committee due to the increase in violent incidents, as Sandra has described, in downtown Dartmouth. The reason for doing so is and was an effort to find solutions to the increased violence in the downtown. There is direct correlation to the high density and high numbers of homeless who in many cases are without supporting services, as well as an increase in youth violence. The Proactive Safety Committee held 3 facilitated workshops over the summer months to seek solutions as to how this crisis could be resolved. Residents, business owners, concerned citizens, not-for-profits, HRM and provincial staff, as well as city councillors, were asked to identify concerns and priorities. Following which, solutions were identified and ranked by the approximately 85 stakeholders who took part in these sessions over the summer months. 70 solutions were identified and prioritized. And the number one solution was the urgent and immediate need for increased community policing of downtown Dartmouth. Downtown Dartmouth needs your support for additional community policing services. As a community of volunteers, residents, and businesses, we are working tirelessly to ensure community safety and inclusivity for all. Downtown Dartmouth needs, however, community policing support to make this happen. Thank you for your consideration, and if there are any questions, I'd be pleased to take those.
Thank you, Libby. Are there any questions of commissioners? I see Harry's hand up. Go ahead, Harry.
Thank you, Chair Kent. Thank you, Ms. Douglas, for presenting, and Ms. McKenzie as well. I'm wondering, you obviously put a lot of work into having a facilitated session. Is there any documentation or reports that were produced out of that you want to share with the board? Or?
Yes, certainly. We are just finalizing our report, and we will be pleased once it is finalized to share it.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, you identified priority number 1 of 70. I'm hoping you could say what priorities 2 through 5 would be. Like, my understanding is that obviously community policing is a key issue, and from your perspective, but I'm wondering how you see community policing fitting in with other supports and services.
Thank you. That's a great question. And I will also note that the priorities 1 through to 5 really came out with a majority of those that attended the sessions. So it was very clear once people stuck up their priorities that these were the top 5. So number 1, as stated, was increased and immediate need for policing. Number 2 was to put in place a community group, or to continue the proactive safety committee, so that there was some type of group that could be contacted by both HRM and, for example, the province before maybe other services were put in the downtown, or before there was an increase of homelessness sent to the downtown area. Number 3 was the need for more street navigators that could also help those that are facing homelessness and home insecurity. Number 4 was to look at youth at risk programming. And those were actually our top 4 solutions. The rest really declined in terms of numbers of percentages.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions from the board? No, seeing none. Thank you very much, Libby. We really appreciate that. I would like to just check in with the clerk to see if we've made any connection to Kristen.
Yes, Chair Kent. We have reached out to Kristen, and she wasn't able to get her audio working, but they will be sending in correspondence to the board, and perhaps even attend the in-person session in November.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. And that means that Willa Oakes will be our next speaker, and then T. Chandler Halliburton, followed by Rachel Dara. Willa, are you in the meeting? Terrific. Your 5 minutes starts now. Oh, can't hear you. No, can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I just need.
Okay, we'll start your 5 minutes now.
Perfect. Okay. Hi, my name is Willa Oakes. I live in District 9, and I'm here to strongly oppose the proposed 2024-2025 HRP budget. I'm going to keep this straight to the point. I don't think that more police officers will make this city a safer place. There's many studies that have been shown that that is not the case. I don't want more police officers on mental health calls. There's many studies that provide evidence that they don't help. And most certainly, I don't want 12 new cops dedicated to hospitals around Halifax. I've heard members of both the our RHP and the RCMP say that mental health calls should not be a part of their mandate. So my question is, if the police know this, why are we even entertaining the idea of investing millions of dollars into having more cops for mental health calls? When will we stop investing in policing and start investing in civilian-led community crisis support services? Having a mental health crisis is not a crime. We all know this. We need to stop investing our money into a failing police service that make people who need health care feel like criminals. In the Defunding the Police, Defining the Way Forward for HRM report, which I'm sure you've all read thoroughly, there is an entire chapter dedicated to how we should respond to mental health crises. It's pages 116 to 127, if anyone feels they need a refresh. The conclusion they came to is that the current model used in the HRM is outdated and not aligned with current best practices. They also note that the majority of people, including those that don't support defunding the police, believe that the police shouldn't be responding to mental health related calls. The report's recommendation is to revise the mental health mobile crisis team model to ensure that these calls are generally diverted to civilian only teams. To conclude, the time is now, the time was yesterday, the time was last year. It's time to dream a lot bigger than policing mental illness. We are so blessed to live in a city with so many smart, capable, community-oriented groups and individuals who are much more qualified to do this work, but aren't given a fraction of the resources that's given to police. I think that, while there's been a lot of people that are pro more police officers in this meeting, I think what we all recognize is that there are a lot of members of our community whose needs aren't being met. And I think we need to dream bigger as to what services we can provide them, because we can provide them with services that are a lot more effective, safe than police. So I can encourage the board, it's time to be brave, it's time to dream big, and it's time to say no to the police. It's time to invest in civilian-only mental health mobile crisis team. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Willa. Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Critchley?
I have two questions of clarification. They're actually not for our speaker. I really appreciate our speaker's presentation, but I just think they might be helpful for the public and for our deliberations. So the first is for
Okay, just before you go through, who is the question to, if it's not for Willa?
one is for the chief and one is for Bill.
Those questions should be kept record of for yourself and bring them forward at the next opportunity when we in a future meeting. Tonight is for clarification from the public.
Yeah, that's correct.
Fine by me, appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, Willa, thank you very much. And we now will call upon T. Chandler Halliburton, followed by Rachel Dara, and then Vishal Shrivastava. And forgive me if I've mispronounced that. So T. Chandler, are you on the line?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. There, I can see you.
Oh, you can see me too. There we go.
Okay.
My name is Chandler. I live in downtown Dartmouth. I've been sort of following a lot of the things around policing more than normal the last little while because downtown Dartmouth has just gone to absolute despair and chaos. Some people touched on it before. It's horrific down here. There's no other way to describe it. It's not a safe place for children. It is not a place for businesses to thrive. It is not even a place that I'm proud to show people the downtown core when they come here. And that is a new thing. I've lived in Dartmouth only 14 years, which is not a long time compared, I'm sure, to some people on the call. But I've been really fortunate to enjoy the incredible improvements in downtown Dartmouth over the first 12 years, and then the complete fall from grace in the last 2 years. And I'm not going to harp on the terrible policy, naivete, or just dumb virtue signaling that has allowed the situation in Dartmouth to get where it is. But this is where we are. I'm absolutely in favor of this. The police need more funding. We need more bodies. period, flat, end of statement. We are a growing city that is a powder keg. And nowhere is that more true than downtown Dartmouth, because it is unique in the sense that you have one true area of downtown that is very, very small. You have per capita the highest amount of unhoused people for that area compared to anywhere else in the city. It is also heavily residential, much more than people think. It is not like, hey, here's the commercial district and that's all it is, and the houses are over here. It is all intertwined, and it has been a literal crime-ridden disaster for a long period of time, most recently highlighted by a murder in the middle of the day, vicious stabbing murder, 1 o'clock in the afternoon on the main road. So for people who are maybe in Halifax, like, imagine if there was just a violent stabbing on Quinpool Road or Agricola at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you know? And I was trying to think of which of the dozens of criminal activity to cite as an example on this call this morning. And I was just driving down Alderney at 10 in the morning, and there's a person laid out on the ground outside of the modulars. I don't know if it was a man or woman, because their face was so battered and bloody that I couldn't tell. And that's just 10 in the morning. You know, it's out of control. It is happening as we speak. I mean, literally, if you were to go in downtown Dartmouth right now, there is a crime being perpetrated right now. And the police staff they're understaffed, period. And we can have all these romantic ideas about citizens intervening and doing more and fundamental changes to these systems. And yes, there's a huge failing of all kinds of systems that may have gotten us here, but it is an emergency damage control situation in downtown Dartmouth. And there's a reason that there's a disproportionate number of people on this call who are from downtown Dartmouth. It is out of control, and we need more police. Do I think that police should be tasked so heavily with mental health and addiction services? No. But we can talk about all these romantic solutions that really need to be provincially initiated, because you know how it is, right? Like, the feds have the money, the province has the power, the municipality has the problem, right? So at a base level in downtown Dartmouth, we need more policing, period. It is unquestionable, and anyone who thinks otherwise is willfully delusional. I'm not saying that we don't need other things for other supports. We do. But the Dartmouth, like, the first time in a long time that Dartmouth felt really safe, and there wasn't just active crime, be it drug use or whatever harassment going on in downtown, was the last 48 hours, because they were filming a movie in downtown Dartmouth. And it was great because there was police officers around, and downtown Dartmouth for 48 hours was nice again. And it is out of control. Policing is a very hard job. It's been wrought with historical issues. There's no question, but my gosh, we are a growing city. We have a lot of problems. The violence and the crime is out of control.
30 seconds remaining.
Right now. I could go on for hours with more examples and why. Please, whatever it takes to get more police on foot in downtown Dartmouth. It is desperate. I'm not overstating this. Come down and see it for yourself. It's gross in every sense of the word, and it's scary, and it's getting worse. That is all. Thanks for your time. I've got to go. I appreciate you guys. Best of luck.
Okay, thank you so much. Any questions for Chandler? Oh, he's gone. So we'll now
I'm not
call.
gonna. I'll field the question, but I don't know what you guys want to know from me. You guys know better than I do.
Thank you. I don't know if there are any questions of clarification for Chandler.
No one?
No. Okay.
No.
Thank you, Chandler. Have a good night.
Thank you. Take care.
Rachel Dara, we're now calling upon you to come to the meeting, and followed by Vishal and then Trina James.
Chair Kent, Rachel Dara actually has reached out to the clerk's office to say that she wasn't able to attend, but she has registered to speak at the in-person meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrea. And so I'm calling on Vishal Srivastava. There we are, Vishal. can't hear you. I can see you.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm at the blood donation center because we never thought it will continue late. So I represent the Wines Fusion restaurant in Dartmouth, downtown Alderney Drive, and I'm Ursula's tenant as well. Ursula has covered most of the points. The few things which I wanted to talk about, since we have started this restaurant for 6 months, we have a lot of thefts. Our goods have stolen from the back, from the kitchen. And then we have our staff is complaining about in the night when they move out. There are a lot of, the elements which are not supposed to be there. They're around and they're teasing them, and sometimes they slur and then abuses. And it's very difficult. And then recently I have encountered few issues. My client says they're not going to come because they have been, stopped by a few youngster teenagers not to come in, let them in from both the sides, and it's not safe to walk on the road. So, and I'm certainly losing clients. So it's not a great situation for us as a business owner. So that's what I'm saying. I don't know. My understanding, we need more police protection there, and a regular, a beat constable regularly probably visit and see if there's something going on. That's it.
Hey, thank you very much. Are there any clarification questions for Vishal? Okay, seeing none, Vishal, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
I'll now call Trina James to the meeting, followed by Jesse Hatch and then Frank Heimpel.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Trina. I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Oh, I'm gonna give you the privilege of seeing my face, I guess. Hi, everyone. My name is Trina. I am living in District 7. I've been living in District 7 for the last 2-3 years. Prior to that, I was living in Ottawa. Before I go into what I have to say, I'm going to start by saying that I am opposed to the budget increase. When I was living in Ottawa, I was living there during a time where we recently had to experience a Black Muslim man who was murdered at the hands of police during a mental health wellness check. And that is the main reason why I today and will continue to be against the increase of policing budgets, especially when they're outlining the want for mental health resources. I do believe that mental health resources are not something that should be handled by the police. And I think that's a consistent want of everybody on this call. And I also believe that Halifax, Dartmouth are in dire need of mental health resources as well as affordable housing accesses. One thing that I found extremely disheartening when we were having conversations today is this consistent villainization of individuals who are living or trying their best to survive outside. And then this assumption that adding more police within encampments and within areas that are heavily populated by individuals who are navigating chronic homelessness is what's going to fix the issue, and it's not. What's going to fix this issue is when individuals living in the city are able to gain access to affordable housing. What's going to fix this issue is when individuals within the city are actually able to gain access to mental health resources and consistent family doctors. What's not going to fix this issue is having police individuals walking the streets of Halifax and Dartmouth. I do understand all of the comments of individuals such as Ursula and Chandler outlining their fears of living within their own communities. I also want to remind all those individuals that you folks come from communities that have historically and consistently been protected by police. Individuals who look like me and individuals who look like many of the other individuals on this call who have already outlined their disgust in the fact that folks want to increase the police budget are not individuals who would feel comfortable or feel safe around police officers. Matter of fact, I choose not to call the police in times where there is an issue. I'd rather take steps to try and de-escalate a situation or the situation myself. I do recognize that many people on this call also don't agree in the idea of citizen-led mental health resources and refer to it as something that is a sense of romance. And you may call me a hopeless romantic, but I'm someone who strongly believes that community shows up a lot better
than individuals who are police, because at the end of the day, we are individuals who know what these people need. We are individuals who recognize that all of us, especially those who are living on the street, are just wanting something as simple as food, consistent food access, consistent housing that is affordable, and not needing to be harassed or over surveilled by police individuals. So for those who have issues with the homeless encampments and the way they look, I encourage you folks to maybe reflect on what the housing situation looks like within our province, what the average minimum wage and livable income looks like within our problem, and maybe lean into speaking on enforcing or implementing systems where we are actually able to afford life in the city. So we're not having individuals doing their best or trying their best to survive and referring to them trying their best to survive as being scary. It is a privilege for all of us to be living in our homes, and it is a privilege for all of us to have access to safe housing. And I don't think police officers and citizens villainizing individuals who are trying to survive are going to fix the issue.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions of clarification for Trina? Seeing none, I'll now call on Jesse Hatch, followed by Frank Heimpel and Jess McLatchy. Jesse, are you in our meeting? There you are, Jesse. Okay, your 5 minutes can start now.
Good evening. My name is Jessie, and I'm a resident of Halifax, in District 7. I am here to voice my opposition to the proposed creation of 24 new positions requested by the HRP. I don't think there's a lot to add that hasn't already been said. I have been working with online social service for nearly 10 years, and I can say that I effectively do not police, really, unless it is through life or death or somebody has consented to it. The reason for this is because I have never seen police effectively escalate a crisis situation or person experiencing distress. I have seen police use excessive force. I've experienced them arrive 2 and 3 hours after we've made calls. And I've personally been given a very bootleg tutorial by an officer on how to use a lamp in self-defense. But I have not once witnessed a police officer encounter somebody feel safer, or the folks that I'm working with, myself included. So yeah, we already know that 56% of people in Halifax support defying the police. We also know that 70% of people who died in fatal encounters with the police struggle with mental health issues or substance use or both. And that rates of mental health illness and issues are higher among racialized populations, people living in poverty, members of the LGBTQIA+ community, and women. The public strategy, safety strategy working group consulted HRP and RCMP. They themselves across all sessions and inserted responses to the broader spectrum of responses for emergency and non-emergency services. The calls coming from the community, from the research, and from inside the house. That Dom Glynn requested these new positions without citing any statistics or providing context validating why we would need these new positions is unsurprising but baffling to me. I would guess that evidence supporting increased police presence in hospitals or in mental health encounters was not provided because, as far as I can tell, this evidence doesn't seem to exist. This is the same level of incompetence and entitlement to public funds that we saw last year from Dan Kinsella, and unsurprisingly, little has changed. The world is possible, and it's already happening around us as we continue to fall further and further behind on our municipal responses to housing, mental illness, and substance use support. In 2022, Toronto began piloting a community-led solution to respond to mental health crisis and wellness checks called the TCCS. A 6-month evaluation of this program has been released and affirms what we already know and what communities have been saying for years, that police need to be detached from answering mental health calls from hospitals. Mobile crisis support teams consisting of a multidisciplinary team of crisis workers with de-escalation training were dispatched instead of police to crisis calls. They answered 3,000 calls in the first 6 months. They made requests for police attendance 2.5% of the time, and request ambulance attendance 1.7% of the time. Only 8% of the calls resulted in visits to hospital emergency department. Don McLean said himself tonight that police are not necessary in all mental health calls, but for some. So from that evidence, we can extrapolate that police are unnecessarily respond to upwards of 97% of the mental health calls they attend. It's a huge waste of public funds, it's dangerous, and does not warrant the creation of 12 positions. Similarly, in Oregon, in Eugene, the CAHOOTS program has followed the same model. In 2019, of the 24,000 calls they responded to for mental health services, they called police 150 times. This program saved the state $8.5 million in public safety spending that year, which was able to be reinvested in public programming that actually prevents crime before it happens, like libraries, housing, family programming, food security, and harm reduction services. I also want to remind you of what Commissioner Giles said earlier this year about this budgetary process. He said if the budget is not making decisions if the board is not making decisions based on evidence, and the public isn't being provided with the evidence to support their consultation, then unfortunately are not in compliance with these sectors. I would encourage you as a board to try new strategies here of not breaking the law by being non-compliant with the Police Act. We have been given no evidence to support the request for these positions. Your own guidelines say that your role is to ensure that police services are delivering Americans with community values, needs, and expectations. It's clear to me that the other positions are not consistent with those values. Police don't need more training, they don't need more officers, they need to be detasked from responsibilities that have deadly consequences. I also want to read a quote from the Defining the Police report that said, diverting a substantial portion of the police budget to other community services which help people in need of additional supports, justice, and equity is a commitment to actions that prevent crimes from ever happening and addresses the needs of people who are most vulnerable. It's a move away from a punitive vision of justice to a vision of justice that is centered in ethic of care. To the people tonight who have been saying that an ethic of care like this is virtue signaling, that we need community watch groups and more cops, I would ask you to consider how cops have prevented crime when you yourself said there's a stabbing earlier today. That wasn't because there was a lack of cops, it was because there's a lack of social services. Your social services are
30
being
seconds
gutted
remaining.
while your cops are being defeated. More cops are not going to lead to more people being housed or accessing substance use support or mental health support. It's going to lead to more death, higher prison populations, and our most vulnerable populations, specifically Black and Indigenous communities, who will bear the brunt of that. So that's all.
Thank you very much. Any questions of clarification from the board? Seeing none, thank you, Jesse. Let's move on now to Frank Heimpo, followed by Jeff McClatchy, and then the last speaker would be Kate McDonald. Frank, let's get you connected to the meeting.
Hello.
There we are. Okay.
Hi, my name is Frank Heimpel. I live in District 8, but I spend a lot of time in downtown Dartmouth. And I just want to start off by saying, I super strongly oppose the proposed budget increases. And it's also extremely disheartening to hear our unhoused neighbors, our mentally ill neighbors referred to as less desirable people. So I just want to sit with that reality that we don't have less desirable neighbors. We have neighbors in hard situations, like not being housed, not having access to healthcare, not having access to mental health services, not having access to a community that understands these things, and more cops in our communities, especially in roles connected to mental health, is not going to solve that problem. The money that is being proposed to be spent on increasing the amount of police in these areas in relation to mental health or otherwise could much better be spent on so many community services. And when we allow funding to go towards cops instead of those services, we are just further perpetuating the problems that we are seeing. We are not making space for solutions. We are just criminalizing homelessness. We are criminalizing mental illness. We are criminalizing these things that are a product of the world that we're living in already and a product of the lack of services that we're seeing. It makes no sense to be putting more money towards police when you yourselves have said, this is not a police role. It doesn't make sense to be doing it. There are other ways to navigate. If you need to change whatever related to involuntary psychiatric police presence in hospitals, that can just be changed. It doesn't need more cops. And more cops are just not going to prevent the problems that we're seeing. And it's just really hard to hear people talk about this as if more cops in downtown Dartmouth specifically is going to solve these problems, when it's just such a limited view of why these problems are happening, what is going on. And it's just a terrible case of not in my backyard. I'm just so against this, so adamantly against this. And also just extremely disheartened by the language being used towards our unhoused and mentally ill neighbors. My brother, who has recently passed, experienced a psychotic episode, was taken in by police, and was so deeply traumatized by that experience that he died a week later. It is one of my, yeah, just like I'm not interested in letting that happen again. I don't think any of us should be interested in the ways that police engage with mentally ill or unhoused folks. There are so many other better solutions that can be found, but we can't find them unless we put money towards them, unless we fund them, which means defunding the police. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Are there any questions or clarification from the commission? Seeing none, now move to Jeff McClatchy, and our final speaker after that will be Kate McDonald. Jeff, we can get you into our meeting. There we go. Thank you, Jeff. I can see you. I cannot hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much to all listening and participating. My name is Jeff McClatchy. I'm the owner of the Celtic Corner in downtown Dartmouth. I've been here 18 years. I've seen some patterns. I've seen change for the better. I've seen change for the worse. But there is an emergency going on in downtown Dartmouth at this time. And I'd like to speak in support of additional resources to help out in the area. I understand that the new landscape is a reality and our community is changing. I want to involve all members of the community in my community. And in my community, that includes policing. It includes civilian crisis intervention teams. It involves navigators. It involves the unhoused. It involves people that have mental health issues. But I want to recognize that all of those people have a role to play, including our policing forces. And I think we need to support that part of it as much as any part of it, to work together to develop social empathy as well as sympathy, social participation and training to make people work together in the community. I want our community to develop more ethical and moral positions where they understand personal space, property, and safety. I'm not going to judge anybody that lives in our community based on their mental health, but I do often have an opinion on people that do not recognize the personal safety, property, and position of others in the community. That includes the police, that includes people who are unhoused, that includes people that are business people, that are tenants that own property. I would like the police to be involved in every aspect, but also recognize that in some situations, the community should take the lead. But at this time, to ask for less support from the police is not going to help the situation with those who ignore and have a disregard for the personal safety and protection of property in the downtown community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Are there any questions of clarification for Jeff? Seeing none, I will now move to our final speaker of this evening, Kate McDonald. Kate, are you able to join the meeting? There we are. Thank you, Kate. Can you test your mic?
Hello.
Perfect. All right. You can begin now.
Great. Thank you, everyone. My name is Kate McDonald, or Kay McDonald. I'm from Jibuktuk. I was raised in District 9 and I live in District 8. And I'm back again to oppose another HRP budget increase. I I mean, I recognize that the police have been called upon to respond to mental health crises in lieu and other community supports. So like, why don't we fund other community initiatives and supports? I'm not really sure how we have arrived here. Policing at large does not contribute to overall community health or mental wellness. Healthy and joyous communities do not have the most amounts of police. They have an abundance of resources and relationships. I would argue with tons of facts to back that, that policing as a practice negatively impacts the mental health of thousands of folks a year. That is actually including police officers. In April 2022, Dean Steinberg, the president of the Halifax Regional Police Association, was quoted in saying that the police themselves have seen a large increase in mental health injuries to officers. Has that been addressed internally? Has HRP proven a place of employment that's like good for their employees' mental health before they're trying to address or solve or support community mental health? That feels like an important thing to identify. How are police identifying mental health within a mental health crisis within community? How are you defining crisis? I can think of several incidences where police have poorly reacted to those who are in a mental health crisis or who have been perceived to be in mental health crisis. I work with youth often and I accompany them to the hospital, various appointments, mental health services. And the last thing that I think would create a welcoming and loving, supportive environment would be seeing armed police officers within the hospital. I think that there's a lack of understanding surrounding the impact of police violence on civilians through a holistic mental health lens. And that concerns me and shows an inability or lack of skills in relationship to supporting mental health. I work in the nonprofit sector where I've been working for about 10 years. And if you request an increase in funding, there's a myriad of reports that you need to provide to prove that you're capable of receiving this funding, or that the funding you are requesting will be used adequately, or there will be a return on investment on that funding, or that you've already proven successful in using the funding that you already have access to. Another few points that I want to talk about is that most people who said that they were pro-police have historically benefited from the police presence or police supports. Like, I just feel like that's an echo chamber, to be honest. I would love for us as a city and a broad community to like address our privileges in relationship to talking about systems and systems of harm and policing at large. I was also at the community safety meeting at Alderney that was hosted by Libby Douglas. And there were cops there who were obviously voting for more policing. It was unclear how folks were invited to that community safety meeting. It was unclear how I was invited to that community safety meeting. I was there through my work, but I don't feel like we had a good sample of community. I don't feel like folks were free range invited to come speak or vote on these issues. So that feels like problematic that then those findings are being presented here, which I don't know that I knew about in a clear way. I just think that we have access to other successful ways to take care of each other. Like, that's simply it. And I just don't think that they have to be things that perpetuate harm. And I feel like, yeah, I've been at a million of these meetings talking about other ways that we could fund things. There's thousands of reports. I'm not saying anything new. And I hear folks in downtown Dartmouth talking about the issues, and I hear you, I see you. I grew up in this city. I'm not brand new. I'm not new. I'm not an import. I didn't come over here like a few years ago. I was born and raised here, right? And by that, I'm more or less talking about folks who moved here through COVID. Yeah, we saw a huge wave of folks move here through COVID. And I feel like sometimes when we're talking about these issues, they're not in a longstanding way. I've seen the city change, seen the population increase. I get it. There's problems that come along with that. Those problems aren't solved by more police. Folks who are like having issues on the street need a home, right? This is not new. I don't understand. I feel like we come to these meetings as community members and I say relatively the same thing every single time. I honestly do. Like, I can't believe y'all still have time for me. And so I'm wondering.
Seconds remaining.
Sweet. I have nothing left to say that I haven't already said, other than at what point does community listen to? That's it. I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I don't. So if there's a way that we can expedite this process, that would be incredible. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Kate. Are there any questions of clarification for Kate? Commissioner Giles.
Ms. McDonald, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
You said, I think, and if I misheard you or if I didn't interpret you correctly, please feel free to correct me. You said that those who support the police are those who have received the benefit of the police. I'm not sure I know what that means.
Oh, sure, totally. I just mean in like relationship to certain identities having privileges navigating with the police. Like most of the folks who were in support of the police were white. And historically, white folks have an easier time navigating the justice system at large. We've seen stats come out of Halifax for years at this point in relationship to the internal racism within HRP. So of course, white folks at large are going to say, I would like to see more policing. Even they've always been nice to me. It's like, yeah, okay. Understandably so.
What about white folks like me, to whom the police have not always been kind?
Well, then I would propose that we see eye to eye.
And would it be fair to conclude that as our city adds 2.5 churros annually, it would only stand to reason that we have more service providers, not just police, but firefighters, maintenance workers, staff clerks, those who provide benefits, those who navigate for those who require benefits, things like that?
Yeah, totally. I would love to see at large more supports for the growing population of HRM. I would love to also see that those supports prove to be effective in the things that they're claiming to do or saying that they're experts in. That's all.
Thanks, Ms. McDonald. Thanks, Chair Kent.
Sweet.
Thank you both. Anyone else that would like clarification from Kate? Okay, seeing none. Kate, thank you very much. Have a good evening. That concludes the presentations. I'm just going to turn my light on. It's getting dark in my office. 1 second. There we go. That's a little better. It was becoming harder and harder for me to see. We have finished that. We'll now move on. Our agenda really was about this evening was about our presentations. Want to again thank everyone for participating. We'll now move to 10.2 committee member updates. Are there any updates? No, seeing none. Added items. Madam Clerk, do we have any added items? I missed the beginning of the meeting.
Chair Kent, there were no added items.
Okay, thank you. Items for future consideration. And we have no in camera. Any notices of motion tonight?
So Ken, I gave my notice of motion last day as it relates to HIPAA legislation and trying to connect with the Department of Health and Department of Justice on that. So I'll just give that again in light of ahead of our next regular meeting.
Okay, thank you. And the date of our next meeting is November the 15th, as previously scheduled. The November 1st meeting has been canceled due to agenda being light. We have a lot of meetings scheduled, so we thought this one would be one that we should cancel. So at this stage, again, I thank everyone for coming forward. I want to take this moment, because I wasn't available at the beginning, to acknowledge that today Commissioner Dennis Daly with the RCMP was officially sworn in as his and the transfer of the role happened today for him as the commissioner for H Division, which would be the CO for the entire province of Nova Scotia, who works out of the headquarters in Dartmouth. So, and we had the pleasure of meeting him at our last meeting, but congratulations. Perhaps Chief Christie can pass that along on behalf of the board again. Thank you. I think at this stage, we'll call this meeting, ask for a meeting adjournment motion. And wish you all. So moved by Commissioner Giles. Thank you. Thank you to all the staff and chiefs. Go safe and do what you do best.